Thank you so much, everyone, first of all, for joining us to talk about Direct to Open. We are so excited about this new collective action model for open access scholarly monographs and edited collections, and we're just delighted at the enthusiasm there is around the world. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to attend and learn a little bit more about D2O. Since there has been a lot of interest in the webinar and challenges to global attendance, we'll be recording today and sharing the link out in the coming weeks. For those of you who registered, we'll send a link out to the recording automatically when it's available. If for whatever reason you're not registered and you're interested in receiving that recording, feel free to reach out to me, Amy Harris. My email is out there, I think on the library listservs, et cetera, also on the MIT Press website if you're looking for contact information, and I'd be happy to send you the recording when it's ready. We'll have a presentation to start, and then that'll be followed by a Q&A session. Please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to submit your questions, and there are some instructions on how to use that feature in the chat that Jennifer very helpfully put in there. She'll be monitoring the Q&A throughout the session, and at the end we'll read the questions out, and Emily and Raim, our panelists, will respond. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our wonderful panelists. Emily Farrell is Library Partnerships and Sales Lead at the MIT Press, where she works with libraries on ensuring access to digital content. Before the MIT Press, she worked in both sales and as an acquisitions editor for linguistics, developing a program in applied linguistics and sociolinguistics at De Gruyter. She holds a PhD in sociolinguistics from Macquarie University and serves on the board of the nonprofit legal services organization Unlocal, as well as the Foundation for the Yonkers Public Library. And we're so grateful to Raim Crowe, our second panelist, managing partner of Chainbridge Group, who has over 30 years experience in academic and scholarly publishing. He's advised scores of publishers and nonprofit initiatives, including scholarly societies, university presses, and academic libraries on sustainability approaches, specializing in open business models and collective support design. And since 2002, Raim has also been a senior consultant at Spark. And of course, he was integral in helping to develop Direct to Open. So we're so happy to have him here to answer expert questions so expertly about the design of this model. So without further ado, Emily.
Thank you so much, Amy, for that introduction. And I'm likewise excited, thrilled to be able to talk to the model to a broader audience and to have so much interest in Direct to Open internationally. So I'm going to start with slides that we have for this presentation. Just make sure that that's looking all right. And so today we're going to be talking about Direct to Open, the monographs, the new monographs model that we've been working to implement at MIT Press. And as a nonprofit mission-driven university press, we've been exploring pathways for equitable digital distribution, including open access for over 2 decades now. So we've experimented and innovated across content forms through partnerships and cooperations. And today we're going to focus on the Direct to Open model and talk about the details of the model. But to begin with, I'm going to provide something of an overview of what the press has done and is doing in moving towards opening scholarly books, how we came to this model in particular, Direct to Open, and why we believe this model is an important step in the right direction for opening scholarly books. So after I give some brief background, I'll pass it over to Raim, who, as Amy mentioned, has been working on the development of open access models for a good while, including Subscribe to Open, and Raim is the architect of Direct to Open. So Raim's going to provide some background on the model, how it was developed and why, and then I'll jump back in and talk about the sort of support we're looking for from libraries. We'll take a quick look at the fee structure that we're using. If you have any questions you may have seen in the chat, do use the question and answer feature throughout the session. Jennifer Canella, my colleague's going to be monitoring the chat, and then we'll have a discussion at the end. There should be plenty of time But for the moment, I'm going to turn this video off and talk through some of this model. So to begin with, some background on what we've been doing on open books at MIT Press. So we work in numerous ways to advance open science at the Press, and in particular when it comes to experimenting with books. We've invested in open access books through various funding partnerships. For example, we've worked together with Tome towards an open monographs ecosystem to support a couple of first books open access. We've also recently received funding from the Mellon Foundation, which opened a set of architecture and urban design books. And these books are all hosted on our MIT Press Direct platform, which we launched in 2019 as a way for us to disintermediate digital distribution and also to increase the direct relationships we have with libraries. The platform Direct gives us more flexibility in owning and developing strategy around open knowledge. Our journals are now hosted on Direct. And so our open access books sit on the Direct platform alongside our other monographs and also our trade book collections. We've also worked on the development of new infrastructure to provide support for open books. So that includes the PubPub platform, which the Press developed with MIT Media Labs as part of the Knowledge Futures group. And that also hosts some of our open access projects. So for instance, one book in particular, Data Feminism, went through open community peer review on the PubPub platform, which allows for annotation. And then the book was published open access in the Strong Ideas book series, which is made a series that's made open access through funding and cooperation with the MIT libraries. So all of this to say, we've been exploring all manner of ways to open our books, in particular in a financially viable and sustainable way. And the first steps have been to work on these smaller projects with smaller partnerships, but we really wanted to start thinking bigger. And we wanted to be able to open our new monographs on publication going forward in a way that we could make it sustainable. So thanks to a grant from the Arcadia Fund at the end of 2019, we've spent the last year and a half working with Rain Crow to develop a robust open access model for our scholarly monographs. And that is Direct to Open, which we talking about today. So I am going to now pass the Zoom over to Rain, who's going to talk about some of the details of the design of the model and its broader context.
Thanks, Emily. So as context for understanding the design of Direct to Open, it'd be useful to review the Press's objectives and success criteria for the model. First, the Press wants to ensure open and equitable access to both authors and to readers. And given the unequal author access to funding, this effectively eliminates the use of book publishing charges or other author fees. The Press also wants to open all of its new monographs, which average about 90 a year, not just selected titles. So the model needs to deal with the entire front list of Press monographs, which requires a more comprehensive approach. Again, rather than a title by title funding approach. As for the financial objective, the model seeks to replace the revenue the monographs currently generate, not to increase that revenue. And this means that the financial target for the open model represents about half of the first copy direct cost for the new monographs. So in other words, current revenue for the monographs don't cover all the Press's direct costs, and neither does the new model. It continues the cross subsidies for the monographs that already exist and from other content. While empirical data on the effect of open access on print sales remains thin, there are some indications that open access may have little or no negative effect on individual print sales. And so we've assumed that we haven't assumed a loss of all individual print. So that assumption, positive assumption, helps keep the participation costs low for most institutions. And finally, we've tried to develop a model that could be replicated by other presses. That's not to say that the model is universally applicable or that it might replace all other models, simply that it might be applied by presses with similar objectives and characteristics with MIT. In terms of challenges, the presses model, like any attempt to fund open resources, confronts the collective action problem. That is essentially, if the content is provided openly and non-contributors are not excluded from access, then it is in any individual institution's narrow self-interest not to contribute to its provision. So the challenge is how to motivate a sufficient number of institutions to contribute and how to maintain that support over time. In the context of open scholarship, the most common approaches for motivating support for open resources are collective support models that rely primarily on institutional altruism and pro-collective behavior, and approaches that motivate institutions to participate by providing benefits that are exclusive to contributors or private benefits. Sometimes these approaches are used in combination, although there's an inherent tension between them, as private benefits tend to crowd out altruistic behavior. That is, private benefits can resemble conventional market transactions, leading libraries to respond to them as such. So it's important to strike the right balance when we're using both kind of collective pro-group behavior and private benefits. Coordinating a collective model is especially difficult if you can't identify the target group for the collective action. So the model's design also reflects the fact that compared with journals, for example, there's relatively little institution-specific market data for monographs. With journals, a publisher knows which institutions currently subscribe to a title. With monographs, because of the distribution channels used, the press doesn't enjoy such specific market data. Still, we need to make assumptions about how many institutions might participate in an open offer. And we'll discuss what those assumptions are in a minute. But for now, we'll just note that there is this uncertainty that the modeling needs to accommodate. So to motivate participation, Direct to Open offers what we think should be compelling benefits exclusive to participating libraries, primarily in the form of term access to the press's extensive monograph backlist, which includes about 1,100 SSH titles and about 1,200 Steam titles. And Emily will talk in a minute about the other details of the offer. And to provide revenue stability over time, the offer to open the front list content recurs annually. In other words, it's open once and stays open. Every year's front list content is offered as a separate option. And there's also a collective aspect to the offer in that, in addition to the private benefits, in that the support fees go down as the number of participating institutions increases. But this dynamic works in combination with the exclusive backlist benefit. So next slide, please. So looking at the logic underlying the Direct to Open support fees, again, the model seeks to reach a specific financial target for each collection and makes opening the front list contingent on those targets being met. And that leaves the issue of setting the support fees that distribute the costs across participating institutions. This process involved a series of steps and assumptions. We started by defining and sizing fee tiers based on institution type, size, and serials budget in order to allow as many institutions as possible to participate. We then used these assumptions based on secondary market data about the demand for monographs by institution type to estimate the role of participation by institution type. So for example, PhD institutions on average purchase ebooks at about 4 times the rate of bachelor's institutions and about 5 times the rate of master's institutions. So this that informed the participation assumptions. We incorporated assumptions about the role of demand for SSH versus Steam titles, again, based on secondary market information, to estimate the role of uptake for each collection. And we included assumptions about the role of size of each of the subject collections based on average title counts to calculate the support fees for each collection. The SSH collection is about a third larger than the STEAM collection, so we had to take that balance into account. We also made assumptions about commitments to one or both collections by institution type, because you can either get one or get both, and there's a slight discount if you commit to both. So with all these variables built into the model, we tested various scenarios in terms of the number of institutions, number of participating institutions required, and this testing sought to keep the support fees as low as possible while trying to be realistic in terms of the number of participants. So this is a heuristic trial and error process, and ultimately we ended up assuming about 480 participating institutions worldwide at the fee levels that Emily will review in a minute to generate the required support revenue. Again, the revenue targets don't change for the press. If more institutions participate, the press doesn't see any more revenue. The fees just go down for the participating institutions. So we're hoping that the average, low average cost per title, along with the other aspects of the offer, which Emily will now describe, will make participating compelling to institutions of all types and sizes. Emily, back over to you.
Thanks, Raim. So now to get into some more of the details of the model itself and what this offer looks like. So we are looking for support from libraries for our monographs collection, which is around 90 titles per year. So the collection we've put together and that we're asking for support for is this around 90 titles a year in the complete collection. But we've also split this into a humanities and social sciences collection, which on average is about 53 titles per year, and a STEAM collection, so STEM plus art and design, which is slightly smaller at 37 titles on average. And that covers the complete collection without overlap. So libraries can choose to support one or the other, or to support both. So if your library happens to be more humanities and social sciences directed, then you can choose to support the subject areas that match your collection. We're looking to reach a fixed financial target or commitments to this model by the end of September. And once we know that we've reached that threshold, we will then be committed to opening monographs that publish in 2022 upon publication. As part of the commitment to this model, libraries will get access to the corresponding back file. So if your library supports the STEAM collection, you will also have access to the back file for the STEAM collection. Or if you support the complete collection, you'll have the full back file for all monographs, which is around 2,300 books. It's more than that. And the other important feature of this is that even if we don't reach the threshold, if your library commits to funding the model, then you will still have access to that back file, even if the front list offer fails. And so that means you won't need to pay the commitment fee, the support fee, but you will have access for the year. So you only pay if the front list does go open. But we also won't be opening the collections if we don't reach the financial threshold. In approaching this as a collective offer and looking to libraries to come together to support the model, one of the main reasons for choosing this approach is that it enables us to lower the fees for all institutions. It also is something that we plan to do annually. So we're looking for commitments from libraries for next year, or up to 3 years. So we're not looking for, we are looking at potential 3-year commitments, and we have some commitments for 3 years, but we'll be doing this as a an annually recurring offer. Another important feature, as I mentioned, relates to the fact that the success is based on a threshold. So if we do get above the target, for instance, for one collection, we have a large number of libraries that come and support the humanities and social sciences collection. Above the financial threshold for that collection will then cascade into the second collection to support the other subjects. And then if we are above the threshold for the complete collection, then that will enable us to redistribute to lower the fees across the board for everybody with the excess commitments. So to sum up, what we're looking at is bringing libraries together to become supporting organisations of Direct to Open, to collectively open our front list monographs starting next year. As a participating library, a supporting library, you gain access to the Monographs archive on the Direct platform. We're then able to, in this model, distribute collection costs equitably and lower participation for all supporting institutions. An important piece of this model is we really were looking to build something that has more of an eye to equity, and that includes an interest in lowering pricing, making sure we have more granular tiering so that we have tiers set at prices or at fees that enable more institutions of different sizes to support the model. The backfile access for commitment regardless of success, the fixed financial target, so we're not looking to increase profits, but rather to just to make sure that we're making this model sustainable for our monographs program in such a way that we are still able to provide the sort of excellence that we do now. So the copy editing that we do for monographs, the sort of shepherding and promotion that we do for our monographs, we want to ensure that we're able to continue to do that and support our authors. And also it moves away from book processing charges. Even for authors and researchers that have some access to open access book funding, it's quite a challenge to be able to fund a book open access. And this way authors know their books will go open access and they don't need to find the funding. And our acquisition editors also are relieved of that process as well. And so perhaps something that everybody's been waiting for, we now have this up on the website. So we'll just take a quick look at this, but you can go to the Direct to Open site to look at this fee structure more closely. This is the level of granularity for US institutions. So we have 16 tiers for US institutions of varying sizes and types. You can see that there's the humanities and social sciences pricing, STEAM pricing, and then although the model itself, because it only covers partial direct costs for monographs, there isn't space and this isn't a market-based model, there's no space for discounting. We have been able to build in sort of an incentive discount for both, supporting both collections. So there is the 5% discount there. You can also see, to what Rain was just mentioning earlier, the assumptions of the number of institutions we're looking to see support the model at each size. We've also worked with a number of, and are working with a number of consortia particularly internationally, to create tiering based on other national banding systems and so forth. So we've worked with CALL in Australia, with CRKN in Canada, with JISC to make sure that we have granular pricing for their members as well in the national context. So where are we and where are we going in the next few months? So far, since announcing the model in March, we've seen an immediate strong interest from the library community, which has been fantastic. So we've been having a lot of conversations with libraries worldwide, both for individual institutions, but also with consortia, looking at ways that we can coordinate more centrally. And one of the fantastic things that we've seen so far is that it really is what we were looking for, which is a wide range of institutions interested in supporting Direct to Open. So it's not, we certainly would expect to see great interest and support from ARLs, but we've got institutions that are much smaller, interest from high schools, interest from libraries across the board, which is really great to see. We already have some early commitments, and we'll be putting institution names out on our site to show who's committing to the model. We also have seen commitments to supporting the model for 3 years, which is great in terms of already knowing we have some interest in seeing the model, in supporting the model over the course of a longer period. We've got a number of institutions that are reviewing licenses, and we're also working together with different consortia to do licensing centrally. So we're working together with JISC in the UK, for instance. So if you're a JISC member, that will make things easier for you to do a central license. And we're in process with a number of other consortia. But certainly, speak to your consortia about getting in touch and working together to promote this to libraries. The deadline for benefits is September 30th this year. So there's no reason not to commit to supporting the model now. We will be invoicing later in the year, or at least with flexibility. So we do have some institutions that are interested in being invoiced before the end of this fiscal year, and we can certainly do that. But we have the deadline set at the end of September so that we have time to process the support and know whether we've reached the threshold before the end of the calendar year. So I think that's most of the details of the model. I see that there's questions that have come in, and just as a last point to say, we certainly have lots of thanks to give to Arcadia for supporting the model, and also that we've had the MIT libraries come on in the first year as a major sponsor, and the funding that they're providing for us will subsidize some of the fees for smaller institutions. So it may be that if you are a smaller institution, that the fees in that table in the first year will be slightly discounted. So we're able to put together a full prospectus for you if you're interested, and you'll be able to see what that discounting will look like. But the support is much appreciated. I think I'll stop sharing slides now, and I think we'll just move on to questions.
Yes, we do have a couple of really great questions here. Thanks, Emily, and thanks to everyone for submitting really thoughtful and considered questions. I'll start off by asking a couple of clarifying questions that have come up on the queue here. Would it include textbooks? We buy the front list of MIT publications, and the list of exclusions is significant. So if we can clarify that.
Yeah, so because this is a monographs program, it will not include textbooks. We do on the Direct platform so far, so the platform we launched in 2019, we have included our trade books, and those will remain available on the platform. Trade books aren't, as this is focused on monographs, the trade collection will be available sort of alongside the monographs program. But this is, as we get going, really the modeling that we've done is to support the monographs program. but in terms of exclusions, the exclusions that we have on the platform are really just for where we have image rights issues or other digital rights difficulties. So so that's a place where we don't have books up, and textbooks and reference works. That's right. But in general, we don't exclude, you know, titles that we view to be course adopted or trade titles. So those are available. So in terms of exclusions, I'm not sure that I would necessarily say that we have sort of we actively exclude a lot of titles.
Great. Amy, it looks like you wanted to answer a question about our POD. So what is MIT's approach with respect to POD?
Yes, thank you, Sandy, for that question. And of course, he pointed to the wonderful work that I think Barbara Klein-Pope is also on the call. I don't want to, she did such wonderful work at National Academies Press to, you know, make their list open. Same for Sandy when he was at Penn State. We actually really, we built this model with the intent that these books will in no way be different or treated differently than our other scholarly books, our other books. It's important to our authors that their books receive the same peer review, the same editing, the same design and production, that they be able to have a print copy of their books. So we will be printing copies of these books. We'll be marketing these books, sending them out to major journals for review, because that's an important part of the scholarly evaluation process. It was very important to us for these not to be treated differently than other books published by the MIT Press, because that's an investment in our books that we feel is very important and valuable to the scholars that we serve. So I hope that answers your question.
In regards to titles and availability, are the titles in Cognet and the MIT computing titles that are sold via IE Explorer excluded?
That's a good question. So we will continue our relationship with IEEE, and there are a number of works that we put in the IEEE, or a good number of the works that go into the IEEE Explore platform that are classified as trade. So that is sort of an additional benefit that continues for the IEEE relationship. So that's something that we're sort of working out, so that there will be you know, those sorts of titles available through IEEE separately. Yeah. And then Cognet, there has been an overlap of Cognet titles and the titles that we host on Direct since we launched Direct, and that will continue. We're sort of in the process of reviewing Cognet, but I mean, the major benefit of Cognet is the reference works that we don't have available digitally anywhere else, and that will continue. So those reference works will still be available through Cognet, as well as the journal's content.
Great, and I like this question. Is access to the back file the only inducement for sustaining members that overcomes the free rider problem?
I think Raim is very well experienced at talking about the free rider program, but I would challenge that only is necessarily the word to stress. I think that access to 2,500 or so DRM free monographs is a reasonably good inducement.
Right, and the size of that of the backlist means that the value of that benefit is going to continue for a long time. It'll be 20 years before even half of the back file is open. So as Emily said, it's the principal benefit, but it is a significant principal benefit. And another aspect is the conditional provision of the content. Is that won't be open unless people participate, but that's not an exclusive benefit. And there's another one that I think another benefit that we're talking about that we haven't settled on yet. So this is provisional, which is, and it addresses like the question, another question in the list about what if somebody has to publish under a mandate, and how is the timing of that handled? And one approach to that would be to assure institutions who commit to the authors from institutions that commit to the offer, that they're if they publish a monograph in the time frame, that they would be able to publish it open, irrespective of whether the front list is opened. But that's just an idea. At this point, we need to unpack it all the way. But that would be another significant benefit, potential benefit for institutions.
Wonderful. Another great question. Library budgets have been hit hard by the pandemic and are not expected to recover anytime soon. Will this situation not affect commitments to this program?
I think that's a really, there's a lot of interesting things tied up in that question. Library budgets, I think there are a lot of people on this call that know very keenly about how the pandemic has hit library budgets. And I think that if the interest that we've seen in the conversations that we're having are any indication, it's sort of twofold, right? That budgets are shrinking, but at the same time, digital demand went through the roof during the last year, especially because people have been working from home, in all different contexts and trying to access content. And so I do think that there's a clearer demand that more books be made open access in terms of the need for it, the need to increase access. And I think that there are a lot of libraries that I've had conversations with over the last 2 months that are stepping up to support this model, that do see that that starting to allocate some of the budget, even if they haven't in the past. So I've certainly had conversations with libraries that haven't been supporting open books programs before, but want to. And so I think that there's something that's quite practical here, honestly, in saying if we move this allocation to a model that gives us a huge increase in access to content for our own library, as well as contributing to the common good by opening up more of this content for libraries worldwide, that there's a great argument for your own institution. There's a great argument for the broader sort of scholarly communication landscape, particularly if, as we hope, we see more presses take this sort of model up. So I think that, did we plan to launch a model like this in the middle of a pandemic? No, we did not. Do I think that there are opportunities here in this challenge? Absolutely. And I think that there are, as I said, there have been so many libraries that have enthusiastically, asked for information and are supporting this program.
And speaking of the model, I have a question here. I know several of these new models are characterized differently. Do you call Direct to Open a subscription, a membership, a support system, something else? And thank you for the great presentation from our anonymous attendee.
We haven't characterized it as a membership model. Not that it basically it is a collective offering, but again with elements of exclusive benefit to participants. So it doesn't rely solely on altruism like a lot of membership models for open scholarship resources, open science resources, and it really does rely on it's in the institution's best interest in any given year to participate. And yes, it opens up content, and that's good for the social good, but it's the local value is compelling as well. But we haven't haven't called it a subscription like Subscribe to Open, which is really does uses subscription processes and the like. So to distinguish between the two, I wouldn't call it a subscription, and we'll have to come up with something clever to use for it. So.
As far as concerns, there's some questions over concerns for authors. With this model, do authors retain copyright?
That is a good question and a big question. Rights retention is a complicated conversation. At the moment, the approach is, and Amy Harris may have a better answer for this one, but I understand that we're working on it on a sort of case-by-case basis with authors in terms of copyright retention. The same with CC BY licensing. We do tend to approach it with a CC BY NCND license, but we have flexibility to work with authors that under their funding mandate need a different type of license. Rights retention can be, and I feel I'm not speaking from a point of expertise, I have to say, but rights retention is a challenge for managing things like translation rights, sub-licensing rights, working on behalf of authors. So I think that that's not something that publishers have yet found good pathways through the challenges of. So I suppose that's about the best answer that I can provide, unless Amy has something else to add.
You know, I have to admit that this is something that I'm not in touch with, and we probably have folks who are attending who could answer this. I do know that this is something that, you know, where our acquiring editors are extremely sensitive to author requests and author questions about this. I do believe that that's something that we address on a case-by-case basis, and I know Emily's speaking to like rights reversion. Which is I think.
Sorry, I meant retention and not reversion. We've just had, yeah. My mind was on something else. I meant retention rather than reversion. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that we're not more on top of that question. Of course, these works would be CC BY licensed, and I think that however you cut it, my understanding of copyright law is that the author, the author always has a pretty strong position when it comes to copyright, but it's something that we talk to authors about all the time. And I know that, we've, that authors have retained copyright to their works at this press. And I hope that Geeta doesn't murder us later for that answer, but thank you so much for that question. It's very important.
Yeah, we do have a few of our editors on this call. So yeah, I agree. I hope they're not waving their hands in the background, but we can follow up as well.
Geeta did just add to the chat here. Because we are offering authors all of the benefits of traditional publishing, including our work to license translations, subsidiary rights, etc., and to share that revenue with them, we may retain certain rights to ensure we can support this.
Thank you so much, Geeta. Eloquently put. And I need to set that response aside to have ready when we're asked. I'm just looking through some of these. There's so many questions. So
many great questions. May choose or may combine a couple of them here regarding our front list, the discrepancy between the titles offered in our front list versus what will be offered in direct to open. Can we clarify that?
Yes. So we're trying to make sure that it's very clear how the two relate to each other. And as you can imagine, this is new, it's a novel model. So, it's something that we're working our way through, but essentially we currently have the backfile title list. So that's all titles through 2021 up on the direct to open site that indicates the list of books that will be available for access in the direct to open backfile and how they're classified as humanities and social sciences or STEAM. So you'll be able to see that. We will also have the collection up that covers the trade titles. So you'll have available a title list for the trade collection. And those together are what we currently have as part of the direct ebook packages. So they'll sit next to each other and be complementary. And we'll have pricing available for the trade collections up before too long as well. And so it'll be clear sort of how these sit next to each other, so that again, this continues to be sort of a sustainable approach, whereby if you have been a supporter and a purchaser of the ebook collections on Direct in the past, that you will still be able to have that sort of comprehensive coverage while also supporting the opening of these books. But in terms of, and to some degree, that was a question I think about sort of price transparency, access transparency, and you know, we're doing that as much as we can by having the title lists up, having the pricing up, having the direct to open pricing up, and you know, doing what we can to make it clear what falls where. And we're trying to think about other ways that we can make that as clear as possible.
Great. This is a question from our international viewers. Where can we look for pricing for UK institutions? And what does pricing look like for international institutions?
So we are just finalizing the agreement with JISC, and they will be circulating the support fees for the UK. And as I mentioned, that's based on JISC banding. So you will see that go out very, very soon. And the pricing really is sort of a match for what we showed you, so for the granular pricing for the US. But Raym, I don't know if there's anything else that you would say about how that fee structure was determined.
I mean, just that what was shown on the slide is kind of a roll up of of multiple countries. So there will be, you know, in Canada and the UK and Australia and other countries, there'll be specific, you know, the fee tiers will be translated to whatever the band structure is that country wants to use. So that there'll be, you know, and Emily can provide that, I can safely say, upon request. So.
Well, great. All of these questions will be transcribed, and if we can expand on our frequently asked question page on our website, we will, with all these great questions. Thank you everyone for submitting your questions, and I hope we were able to answer them as much as possible here. Pass it over.
No, I'm so sorry, scrolling through these questions, there's so many good ones, and I'm sorry that we can't get to them all, though I think we have time maybe for a couple more, I think.
Sure, up to you.
One, I just to answer quickly, I guess I could grab some of these and type responses, but a question from Laurie Morrison about whether there's a discussion with CRKN happening, and yes, there is. We've had initial discussions, and we'll be speaking again in the next week or so about sort of firming that up, but we do already have a banding, a fee structure set up for CRKN, so that's in process. Yeah.
In responding to Joy Painter's question, she was asking me, is this basically a donated payment? Because some public institutions have trouble with voluntary payment, collective offerings. And really, no. I mean, in terms of what you're going, in terms of procurement, what your payment is, or your commitment, and initially, but then ultimately your payment, guarantees access to the back file. So, and even though your commitment does that as well. So, I mean, there is real value being delivered, which is what, these procurement policies are trying to guarantee. And from, the fact that the front list may be open for everyone is logically separate from the fact that locally you get access to that back file, and that's an individual institution, requires individual institution, action to commit. So, and Joy, if you have any suggestions on how that needs to be articulated on invoices or the like, please, we'd welcome any kind of practical insight there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's also just to stress that though we're certainly not calling this a pilot. This is the first year that we're trying this. We are incredibly enthusiastic about this model. We do think, we went through the process of talking to a number of institutions and consortia towards last year to sort of adjust the model, make sure that, we sort of had it sitting at the right spot. And, as I said, we launched the Direct platform as a way to increase our direct relationships with libraries. And we do hope to continue the conversation, to continue to strengthen what we're doing, and, annually sort of move forward with this in a way that makes sure what we're doing is working. There was a question about Creative Commons licenses, but I think you mentioned that and responded to that already.
Have we saw any endowment funding? A la,
Oh yes, I did
Amherst
see that
Press?
question. Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I know that, you know, there are some other, there are certainly some fantastic fully open access books publishers that that have very good relationships with their institutions and primarily operate under a sort of a large investment from their parent institution. So that's, you know, in the case of university presses. We're in something of a different situation as sort of a legacy university press where we have a big program to support, and we're transforming, we're sort of moving from one business model to something different. So we don't have an endowment as the press, as MIT Press, and we do get some in-kind contributions like office space, which we haven't used much of this year, but in general the press supports itself, and so there wasn't really any thought to look towards an endowment or a sort of an institutional support in that sort of way. We are really, as I said, thankful that we have this major sponsorship from the MIT Libraries for the first year, but the model was built without that. So you know, that is being used as a first year subsidy, but we wanted the model to sort of stand on its own to provide that sort of sustainability. But Raym, I don't know if you wanted to add an extra piece.
No, I mean, it'd be great if there's, you know, if there's funding available. It's always great to seek it out, but you know, you'd have a perspective on what's going on internally.
Yes, if you're out there and you have an endowment for us, we won't say no.
And will bibliographic records be provided or downloaded from somewhere?
Yes, that's a great question. So one of the many wonderful things about having launched our own platform a couple of years ago is that over the course of those few first years, we have learned a lot about working with discovery services. We've learned a lot about, you know, how we're providing metadata. And so we do now have you know, good relationships in place with EBSCO, and we have records going into EDS, with OCLC, and with ALMA, and with our records going up into the ALMA community zone. That, you know, it's taken a little bit of time to make sure we have everything in order in the ways that we wanted it to, but the lines of communication are open and good there, and so we do expect, you know, to continue to upload MARC records and KBART so that they're downloadable, or, you know, that you can use them in whichever system that you use. We do already have an open access books collection up in the major discovery services that covers the 120 odd books that we already have on Direct. So you're also welcome to go and see how that goes, pulling that record set down, and, you know, certainly send feedback. We do, again, you know, often have conversations with libraries about how we might improve the way that we're offering metadata, but we also have it up inside our admin portal. We have records up on the public facing site as well for KBART and then discovery services. So yes, we certainly want to make sure that the metadata is there and in order. And we've also been in conversation recently about how our open access books are indexed in Google Scholar. So that's another piece that we're paying attention to in terms of findability, discoverability. Yeah.
Did you want to touch on one last question? We have here, do you expect the pricing fee structure to increase year to year? Is there an incentive for a multi-year commitment, like capped increases?
So at the moment, when we're saying that you could commit to 3 years, that will be without any price increase. So we've got that as sort of the incentive for a 3-year commitment. And in terms of, we haven't yet set a pricing increase. I mean, I think that you would expect to see sort of a small increase year on year, but we don't have grand plans to increase the title numbers year on year for the program, for our monographs program. So in terms of the way that the pricing is indexed to title numbers, you won't see large jumps there. Yeah. So I think we got to a lot of questions, but we can certainly put together a summary and send it out.
Right. Well, and we're about at time. I guess thank you again so much, everyone, for hanging with us through the end of the hour. Once again, we'll send the recording out a little bit later to everybody who registered, as well as the folks who have asked about it. And thank you so much again to our panelists, Emily, Raim, and thank you, Jennifer, for handling the Q&A so ably. Hope to talk to you all soon. Thanks so much again.
Thanks so much.